Your Honor, do you have any idea who my father is?
I'm aware of who your father is, Ms. Castellano. Now, please remain silent.
Silent? This is ridiculous. I've been in courtrooms before. My family donates millions to the city.
Ms. Castellano, I'm warning you.
You're warning me? My father's lawyers will have you off that bench by next week.
That's enough. Bailiff, please approach.
Yes.
26-year-old Victoria Castellano thought her wealth and family name made her untouchable. She had walked into traffic court that Tuesday morning expecting a quick dismissal, maybe a small fine her assistant would pay. What she got instead was a lesson in humility that would cost her far more than money. And it all happened in broad daylight, in a packed courtroom, with dozens of witnesses who would never forget what they saw. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Victoria Castellano was everything money could buy and nothing it couldn't. Designer clothes, luxury cars, penthouse views, and the unshakable belief that consequences were for other people. Her father, Marcus Castellano, had built a real estate empire worth $3.2 billion. He owned shopping centers, office buildings, luxury hotels across 3 states. And Victoria, his only child, had grown up believing the rules simply didn't apply to her. The charges were straightforward: reckless driving, running a red light, and leaving the scene of a minor accident. She had sideswiped a delivery van at an intersection, barely scratched her Range Rover's paint, and driven off without stopping. The van driver had caught her license plate. The police had video from a traffic camera. The evidence was clear, simple, and completely damning. But Victoria wasn't worried. She never was. Her father's lawyers had handled dozens of tickets, a DUI that mysteriously disappeared, and even an assault charge from a nightclub incident that never made it past the preliminary hearing. Money, in her experience, made problems vanish. This would be no different. Judge Michael Torres, 56, had presided over traffic court for 14 years. He had built a reputation as fair but uncompromising, someone who treated a teenager with a speeding ticket the same as a CEO facing reckless driving charges. He had seen every type of defendant: the genuinely remorseful, the habitually reckless, the angry, the tearful, the defiant. But he had never encountered someone quite like Victoria Castellano. And this particular Tuesday morning would test every ounce of his patience and his commitment to equal justice under the law. The courtroom was packed, typical for a Tuesday morning docket. 70 people waited for their cases to be called. Nervous defendants checking their phones, lawyers reviewing files, family members providing support. The room smelled of coffee and anxiety. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting geometric shadows across the worn wooden benches. Victoria arrived 20 minutes late, her heels clicking loudly on the marble floor outside. She swept through the courtroom doors wearing a white Chanel suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Oversized sunglasses perched on her highlighted hair, a designer bag swinging from her shoulder. Her assistant, a harried young woman named Beth, struggled to keep up while balancing 2 coffee cups and Victoria's phone. "Ms. Victoria Castellano," the bailiff called, for the 3rd time. "Here, I'm here," Victoria announced loudly, not bothering to lower her voice as she made her way to the front. Other defendants turned to stare. Judge Torres looked up from his paperwork, his expression neutral but his eyes sharp. "Ms. Castellano, you're 20 minutes late," Judge Torres said, his tone professional but firm. "This court begins at 9 o'clock. Victoria shrugged, removing her sunglasses. Traffic was terrible. You'd think this city could manage its roads better. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Torres's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Approach the bench, Ms. Castellano." Victoria walked forward, her posture radiating boredom and confidence in equal measure. She stood before the judge's elevated bench, one hip cocked, her expression suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else. "Ms. Castellano, you're charged with reckless driving, running a red light, and leaving the scene of an accident. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, obviously," Victoria said, examining her manicured nails. "This is all a misunderstanding. I barely touched that van and I had an important meeting. I couldn't just sit around waiting for police to show up over a tiny scratch." Judge Torres glanced at the file before him. The police report indicates you were traveling 45 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone, ran a red light, struck a vehicle, and left without exchanging information. The van driver required medical attention for whiplash. This is not a tiny scratch, Ms. Castellano. Victoria waved her hand dismissively. He's probably faking it for a lawsuit. People see a nice car and suddenly they're injured. It's predictable. The courtroom had gone completely quiet. Even the lawyers who had been shuffling papers had stopped to watch. This level of arrogance was unusual even for traffic court. Ms. Castellano, do you take these charges seriously? Judge Torres asked, his voice carefully controlled. Seriously. Victoria laughed, an artificial sound that echoed in the silent courtroom. Your Honor, with all respect, this is traffic court. Can we just process whatever fine you're going to give me so I can leave? I have lunch at noon. Judge Torres set down his pen slowly, deliberately. You have lunch at noon, he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Yes, at the Meridian. This new, very exclusive. You probably haven't heard of it. Victoria pulled out her phone, checking the time. Actually, I should probably leave by 11:30 to make it on time. Put your phone away, Judge Torres said, his voice sharp now. Victoria looked up, surprised by the tone. Excuse me? I said put your phone away. You're in a courtroom, Ms. Castellano, not a shopping mall. Victoria's expression shifted from bored to irritated. Look, Your Honor, I don't mean to be rude, but can we speed this up? How much is the fine? 500? 1,000? I'll pay it now. She gestured to Beth, who stood nervously at the back. My assistant has my checkbook. Judge Torres leaned forward slightly. Ms. Castellano, this is not simply about a fine. You endangered other drivers. You caused an accident. You left the scene, which is a crime. And you're treating this courtroom like an inconvenience rather than a legal proceeding where you're being held accountable for your actions. Accountable? Victoria's voice rose, the irritation blooming into something closer to indignation. Do you know who my father is? There it was. Judge Torres had been expecting it, but hearing it still sent a flash of anger through him. I'm aware of who your father is, Ms. Castellano. It has no bearing on these proceedings. No bearing. Victoria laughed again, louder this time. My father owns half this city. His company donated $2 million to renovate the courthouse 3 years ago. You're probably sitting in a chair his money paid for. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Torres raised his hand, and immediate silence fell. Ms. Castellano, your father's donations are appreciated by the city, but they do not grant you immunity from the law. Everyone who stands before this bench is equal under the law, regardless of their bank account. Victoria's face flushed with anger. Equal? Please. I've been in courtrooms before. I know how this works. Money talks, Your Honor. It always has, it always will. My father's lawyers will be here within the hour if I make one phone call, and this whole thing will disappear. Judge Torres's expression remained perfectly calm, but his eyes had gone cold. Is that a threat, Miss Castellano? It's not a threat. It's a fact, Victoria said, her voice dripping with condescension. You can play the impartial judge all you want, but we both know that's not how the system works. Not for people like me. Do you believe wealth should place someone above the law? Comment below, because what happened next would prove that at least one courtroom still believed in justice. Judge Torres stood slowly, his black robe settling around him. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath. He had presided over thousands of cases, dealt with countless difficult defendants, but this level of entitlement, delivered with such casual contempt for the law, was extraordinary. Ms. Castellano, I'm going to give you one opportunity to reconsider your approach, Judge Torres said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. You can apologize for your disrespectful behavior, enter a plea, and we can proceed with this case in an appropriate manner. Or you can continue down this path, and I assure you, it will not end the way you expect. Victoria crossed her arms. Apologize? For what? For being honest about how things work. for pointing out that you're wasting my time over a minor traffic incident. A minor traffic incident that injured someone and that you fled from, Judge Torres reminded her. But I can see you're not interested in taking responsibility. Very well. He turned to the bailiff. Please note for the record that the defendant has shown no remorse, has been openly contemptuous of these proceedings, and has attempted to use her family's wealth and influence to intimidate this court. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. This wasn't going according to script. Wait, what are you? I'm not finished, Ms. Castellano, Judge Torres interrupted, his voice cutting like steel. You came into this courtroom late, dressed like you're attending a society luncheon rather than a legal proceeding. You've been dismissive, disrespectful, and openly contemptuous. You've threatened to use your father's influence to make this disappear. You've shown absolutely no regard for the person you injured, for the law you broke, or for this court. Your Honor, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Victoria started, her confidence finally beginning to crack. No misunderstanding, Ms. Castellano. For the first time this morning, I think we both understand the situation perfectly. Judge Torres opened the file on his desk. Given your behavior and complete lack of remorse, I'm also charging you with contempt of court. That's a separate offense that carries its own penalties. Victoria's face went pale. Contempt? You can't be serious. I am entirely serious. Your behavior has been contemptuous from the moment you walked through that door. Judge Torres looked at the prosecutor. What does the state recommend for sentencing? The prosecutor, a seasoned attorney named James Chun, who had been watching the exchange with carefully controlled satisfaction, stood. Your Honor, the state recommends a fine of $1,500, 1 year probation, license suspension for 6 months, and 40 hours of community service for the traffic violations. Judge Torres nodded thoughtfully. And I'm accepting that recommendation. Ms. Castellano, you're found guilty on all charges. You'll pay a fine of $1,500, serve 1 year probation with mandatory check-ins. Your license is suspended for 6 months, and you'll complete 40 hours of community service at a location to be determined by the probation department. That's ridiculous, Victoria shouted. 6 months without a license? How am I supposed to get anywhere? The same way millions of people without luxury vehicles manage every day, Judge Torres replied coolly. Public transportation, ride shares, or perhaps your assistant can drive you. This is insane, Victoria hissed. My father will appeal this immediately. That is his right, Judge Torres acknowledged. However, we're not finished. The contempt of court charge carries additional penalties. For your behavior this morning, your threats, your complete disrespect for these proceedings, I'm sentencing you to 15 days in county jail. The courtroom gasped. Victoria's mouth fell open, genuine shock replacing her anger. Jail? You're sending me to jail for being rude. I'm sending you to jail for contempt of court, which is a criminal offense. Judge Torres corrected, his voice steady and authoritative. Your behavior constitutes direct criminal contempt, which I have the authority to punish immediately. 15 days is actually quite lenient given the severity of your conduct. This is a joke, Victoria said, but her voice was shaking now. You can't just throw someone in jail for traffic violations. The jail time is for contempt, not traffic violations, Judge Torres repeated patiently. The traffic violations carry fines, probation, and community service. The contempt charge is separate and based entirely on your behavior in this courtroom today. Beth, Victoria called out to her assistant, her voice rising to near hysteria. Call my father. Call him right now. Get our lawyers on the phone. Beth fumbled with her phone, tears streaming down her face. Judge Torres waited until Victoria's attention returned to the bench. Ms. Castellano, your attorneys can file an appeal, but contempt sentences for courtroom behavior are rarely overturned when the conduct is this egregious and well documented. I have 40 witnesses to your behavior, and this courtroom has audio recording of every word you've said. Please, Victoria said, and for the first time, genuine fear entered her voice. Your Honor, please. I'm sorry. I was out of line. I shouldn't have said those things. Now you're sorry, Judge Torres observed, his expression unchanging. After threatening this court, dismissing the person you injured, and making it clear you believe your wealth exempts you from consequences. Ms. Castellano, remorse that appears only when punishment becomes real is not particularly meaningful. I made a mistake, Victoria said, tears starting to form. I was arrogant. I admit that. But jail? 15 days in jail? That seems excessive for being disrespectful. Contempt of court is not simply being disrespectful, Ms. Castellano. It's threatening the administration of justice itself. When defendants believe they can use wealth and influence to intimidate courts, the entire legal system is undermined. That cannot be tolerated. Should judges have the authority to impose jail time for contempt when defendants openly threaten the court? Comment below. This wasn't just about traffic violations anymore. This was about protecting the integrity of the justice system itself. Judge Torres nodded to the bailiff, a calm, experienced man named Frank. Please take Ms. Castellano into custody. She'll be transported to county facility to begin serving her contempt sentence immediately. No, wait. Victoria backed away as Frank approached. Your Honor, please, can we talk about this? I'll pay whatever fine you want. I'll do more community service. Just not jail. Please. The sentence has been issued, Ms. Castellano, Judge Torres said, his voice firm but not harsh. You'll serve 15 days, likely reduced to 10 or 12 with good behavior. It's a county facility, minimum security. You'll be safe. Perhaps you'll use the time to reflect on why your behavior was unacceptable. Frank gently took Victoria's arm. This time she didn't resist, too shocked to fight. Her designer sunglasses fell from her bag and clattered on the floor. Beth rushed forward to retrieve them, sobbing openly now. I can't go to jail, Victoria whispered. But there was no fight left in her voice. You can and you will, Judge Torres said. And Ms. Castellano, when you're released, you'll begin your probation and community service. I suggest you approach those requirements with considerably more humility than you've shown today. As Frank led Victoria toward the holding area, she turned back one last time, mascara beginning to run down her face. My father will have you removed from the bench for this, she said. But the threat was hollow now, desperate rather than confident. Your father is welcome to try, Judge Torres replied evenly. I've been on this bench for 14 years. My decisions are based on law and evidence, not on who someone's father is. Good luck, Ms. Castellano. The door closed behind Victoria. The courtroom remained silent for several long moments before erupting into whispered conversations. Judge Torres raised his gavel and brought it down once. Order. We have many more cases to hear today. Next case, please. The story spread through the courthouse within the hour. By lunchtime, it was trending on local social media. By evening, legal blogs were analyzing whether Judge Torres had overstepped his authority. The consensus among legal experts was clear. While 15 days was on the harsh end for contempt, it was well within his discretionary authority given Victoria's behavior, and appellate courts typically defer to trial judges on contempt rulings when the conduct is clearly documented. Marcus Castellano did exactly what his daughter had threatened. Within hours, his legal team filed an emergency appeal arguing the contempt sentence was excessive. They demanded immediate release and accused Judge Torres of bias. They filed complaints with the Judicial Review Board. They threatened legal action. But Judge Torres's written order, filed that afternoon, was meticulous. He detailed every statement Victoria had made, every threat, every display of contempt. He cited case law supporting contempt sentences for behavior that undermined courtroom authority. He noted that 15 days was actually moderate compared to contempt sentences in similar cases of direct threats to judicial authority. The appellate court reviewed the emergency motion within 3 days and denied it. Their ruling noted that trial courts have broad discretion to maintain order and enforce respect for judicial proceedings. The conduct described in the record clearly constitutes contempt, and the sentence imposed is within acceptable parameters. Marcus Castellano's lawyers tried additional tactics, filing motions to reconsider, seeking review by higher courts, even attempting to have Judge Torres recused from any future Castellano family matters. All were denied or dismissed. The legal system, for once, held firm against wealth and influence. Victoria served 12 days of her 15-day sentence, earning early release for good behavior. The experience was nothing like her privileged life. She shared a cell with 2 other women, slept on a thin mattress, ate institutional food, and had no access to her phone, her assistant, or her father's influence. For 12 days, she was simply inmate 47293, indistinguishable from anyone else in orange scrubs. The first few days were brutal. She cried constantly, refused meals, and spent her allowed phone time begging her father to find a way out. But as days passed and no rescue came, something began to shift. Her cellmates, women from completely different worlds, showed her unexpected kindness. They shared commissary items, taught her how to navigate the facility, and listened when she needed to talk. One cellmate, a woman named Rosa who was serving 60 days for repeated shoplifting, told her bluntly, "You got it easy, princess. 15 days for being rude to a judge? Some of us are here for way less than that and serving way more time. Maybe think about why you ended up here before you complain about how unfair it is." The words stung, but they also resonated. Victoria began to reflect, perhaps for the first time, on her behavior, her assumptions, her belief that rules were for other people. It wasn't a dramatic transformation. There was no sudden enlightenment. But small cracks appeared in her armor of privilege. When Victoria was released, the media was waiting. Cameras caught her emerging from the facility in the same designer clothes she'd worn 12 days earlier, now wrinkled and out of place. She looked exhausted, humbled, and notably, she declined to comment except to say, "I have a lot to think about." Her probation officer, a no-nonsense woman named Margaret Davis, laid out the requirements clearly. Monthly check-ins, random drug testing, 40 hours of community service to be completed within 6 months, and absolute compliance with all terms or she'd go back to jail to complete the full 15 days plus additional time for probation violation. Victoria's community service was assigned to a food bank in a lower-income neighborhood. Margaret Davis specifically chose it, believing Victoria needed exposure to people whose struggles looked nothing like hers. Victoria showed up for her first day expecting to write a check and sit in an office. Instead, she was handed an apron and put on the distribution line, handing out food to families in need. The work was humbling. She met single mothers working multiple jobs, elderly people choosing between medication and food, children who looked at donated cereal like treasure. She heard stories of eviction, medical debt, cars breaking down, lives balanced on a knife's edge where one unexpected expense could trigger catastrophe. These were people her father's developments had probably displaced, people who couldn't afford to shop at stores in his buildings, people who existed in a world she'd never considered. Victoria completed her 40 hours, but something unexpected happened. She kept showing up, not for credit, not for appearances, but because the work felt meaningful in a way her previous life never had. She organized donation drives, recruited corporate sponsors, and used her family's connections, for once, to do good. 6 months after her release, she was volunteering 20 hours a week. The transformation wasn't complete or perfect. She still had moments of falling back into old patterns, still occasionally showed flashes of entitlement. But she was trying genuinely to be different. She reached out to Robert Chun, the van driver she'd hit, and apologized. Really apologized. She paid his medical bills and his lost wages, amounts that were substantial for him but barely noticeable to her. They met for coffee, and he told her about his family, his work, his life. She listened. Her probation ended after 12 months of perfect compliance. Margaret Davis, in her final report, noted, "Ms. Castellano has demonstrated genuine efforts toward behavioral change. While I remain cautiously optimistic about long-term sustainability, her engagement with community service and compliance with all terms suggests the court's intervention had meaningful impact." Judge Torres never commented publicly on the case beyond his written rulings. When legal journals asked for interviews about his use of contempt authority, he declined. When lawyers cited the case in seminars, he remained silent. He had done his job, nothing more, nothing less, treating Victoria Castellano exactly as he would treat any defendant who showed such contempt for the court. 3 years later, Victoria enrolled in community college, studying social work. She was paying her own tuition, working part-time at the food bank, living in a modest apartment rather than her father's penthouse. The relationship with Marcus had been strained for months after her sentence. He'd been furious at the embarrassment, the failure of his influence. But slowly, they'd rebuilt something more authentic than what they'd had before. Victoria never returned to Judge Torres's courtroom, but she did write him a letter. She didn't expect a response and didn't receive one. In the letter, she admitted that the 15 days had been the worst and most valuable experience of her life. She thanked the judge for not letting her money protect her from consequences. She acknowledged that without that intervention, she would likely still be the same arrogant person who walked into court that Tuesday morning. The courtroom where it all happened looks the same. Judge Torres still presides there, still treats every defendant equally, still maintains absolute standards of respect for the judicial process. The wooden benches, the fluorescent lights, the tall windows letting in morning sun, they all remain unchanged. But for those who were present that morning, who witnessed Victoria Castellano's contemptuous behavior and Judge Torres's firm response, that courtroom represents something important. It represents a place where, even temporarily, wealth didn't shield someone from accountability, where threats of influence met unwavering commitment to judicial integrity, where a judge enforced respect for the law regardless of who someone's father was. The case became a teaching example, cited in legal ethics courses and judicial training programs, not as an example of harsh sentencing, but as an example of maintaining courtroom dignity in the face of attempted intimidation. Judge Torres's measured but firm response, his detailed documentation, his refusal to be swayed by threats, all became models for how to handle defendants who believe money makes them untouchable. Justice requires more than laws on paper. It requires people willing to enforce those laws equally, even when faced with wealth, threats, and influence. It requires judges who understand that contempt for the court is contempt for the entire system of law. And sometimes, it requires 15 days in county jail to teach a lesson that privilege had prevented someone from learning any other way. If you believe courts should maintain their authority regardless of a defendant's wealth, if you think these stories matter, subscribe and turn on notifications. Tomorrow's story involves another powerful person learning that some lines can't be crossed without consequences, and you won't want to miss it.